welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving into what Michael Ho, the author of the memoir we're following, calls Phase 4, the crisis. And believe me, it lives up to the name.
It really does. This is where things get incredibly intense for NPKB.
So just to recap quickly for everyone, last time we saw NPKB secure its first kind of forward orders, about $350,000, right? Mostly thanks to Michael's work in Japan and Korea.
That's right. They had some momentum, aiming high, targeting giants like Intel.
But, there's a big but, the foundation was shaky. Their core custom chip, the ASIC, the one from LG, it's delayed.
Seriously delayed, and they're burning through cash like nobody's business. Plus, internally, well, it's messy.
Yeah, the memoir paints a picture of real internal friction. You have Lucas, the chief engineer, and Michael, the sales VP, getting pretty frustrated with the CEO, Tyler.
Deeply frustrated. Kyler's brilliant technically, no doubt, but his lack of, let's say, general management skills is becoming a massive liability, especially with this ASIC delay.
Everything's riding on this chip, and beyond that, on getting validation from the big players, right? It's not just about having cool tech.
Exactly. External validation is key. Their future depends on how the established industry reacts.
Okay, let's unpack this. The heat is definitely rising for the founders. Where should we start? Maybe Taiwan. The market they should have cracked.
Yeah, Taiwan is fascinating because it was such a failure. It was the world's biggest modem manufacturing hub at the time. Should have been a slam dunk.
But it wasn't. Why? What went wrong?
Well, there's this structural issue. The Taiwanese manufacturers, big names like GVC, ASCII, they were basically slaves, is the word used, to Rockwell.
Slaves. That's strong language. Rockwell was the big incumbent, the market leader then.
Totally dominant. And they didn't just sell chips. They controlled the entire ecosystem, allocation of essential components, the tech roadmap, everything.
So even if NPKB had better, cheaper tech, the Taiwanese factories couldn't just switch.
Not easily. Think about it. These companies were mostly assembly houses, not R&D powerhouses. They depended on Rockwell for parts for maybe, multiple product lines.
So if they took a chance on a tiny startup like NPKB,
Rockwell could just cut them off, squeeze their supply. NPKB had zero leverage against that kind of market power. They were too small.
a classic lock-in. Okay, so the market structure was against them, but the sources also mention personnel failures. Management chaos.
Oh, absolutely. Kyler, the CEO, really complicated things. Michael was officially the executive VP of global sales and marketing, his job, right?
Yeah.
But Kyler went around him. He appointed this guy, George, as Asia director and dealt with him directly. Michael was completely sidelined on this.
Without telling Michael, that sounds dysfunctional.
Extremely. And George apparently was ineffective. The source describes him like a broken kite string, totally disconnected from partners like CTB and the beta sites over there.
So conflicting messages, no clear authority, just compounding the external problems.
Precisely. It really highlights how inexperienced they were outside of engineering. Brilliant minds, but managing a global sales effort, organizational structure, not their forte at that point.
Terrible timing for that kind of confusion. And while they're flailing in Taiwan, the results from their big gamble in the U.S. land on their desk.
Yes. The Intel test. This is huge.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The Intel test results arrive.
So they'd sent their prototype board, the FPGA evaluation board, off to Intel's labs in Oregon. They were banking purely on Lucas's design being technically superior.
Makes sense. Let the tech speak for itself.
But Intel's chief modem engineer, he wasn't just doing basic function tests. He pulled out the big guns, something called the Worldwide Telephone Line Last Mile Situation Simulator.
Okay, that sounds serious. What does that do? Why was that the standard?
It's brutal. It basically simulates the absolute worst-case scenario for a phone line. Think ancient Kako wires running past heavy machinery in a thunderstorm, all that noise and interference that happens in the real world, especially that last mile to your house.
So it's not about raw speed, but about resilience.
Yeah.
Holding the connection.
Exactly. Robustness. Can the modem hang on and recover data when the line is just a mess of analog noise? That was the real test for being part of the serious PC ecosystem.
And NPKB. They hadn't focused on that.
They hadn't even known that specific rigorous simulation standard existed. It was a shock, a huge revelation.
Wow. So they realized, okay, our tech works, but to play with Intel, with the big PC guys, we have to meet this standard.
It forced a massive shift in their thinking. Product reliability, quality assessment. It wasn't just about features anymore. It had to be bulletproof in the wild.
It confirms what Michael had been worried about, right?
Yeah.
Technical brilliance alone isn't enough. You need validation against these tough, sometimes unwritten industry rules.
Absolutely. A harsh lesson learned right when they could least afford more problems.
And speaking of problems, while they're digesting the Intel results, the operational crisis hits harder. That LG chip delay gets worse.
Yeah, it gets pushed way back from early 95, like February, all the way to August. That's a long time with zero sales revenue coming in.
Brutal for a startup burning cash.
Almost killed them, but there was a sliver of good news amidst the gloom. LG did finally manage to produce NPKB's unique ASIC definition.
Okay, so the chip design itself was manufacturable.
Yes, even on older tech, 0.75 micron, I think it was. And this was psychologically huge. It meant the core idea worked. And crucially, it let them finally give the product a name.
Ah, the birth of the brand.
Exactly. They officially called it the HSP modem.
HSP modem. Okay, finally something concrete for Michael to sell.
You bet. Michael immediately ran with it. Started pushing hard for U.S. product demos, pitched Packard Bell successfully. Momentum started building again, at least on the sales front.
And Lucas, the engineer, he saw the market heating up too.
Yeah, Lucas declared they were moving straight into designing the next-gen 28K modem, trying to stay ahead. So you see this surge of activity, but the management issues, Kyler's issues, they're still simmering.
Right, which brings us to the ESST situation. This potential deal or merger with an audio chip company. The source says Kyler felt this, like, overwhelming need to dominate the negotiation.
Yes, and this goes deep into his past. His behavior wasn't just about this specific deal. It stemmed from his previous startup, Kangdi Technology.
What happened there?
Apparently, his partner back then, a guy named Yu Chang, basically outmaneuvered him financially. Kyler felt cheated, lost control, lost out on equity and profits. It was a traumatic experience for him.
Okay, so the ESST negotiation wasn't just about ESST. It was Kyler trying to prevent history from repeating itself.
Exactly. He was absolutely determined not to lose control of the outcome again. He needed to dominate the process, the terms, everything. His personal history was driving his actions.
Regardless of whether it was actually the best strategic move for MPKB at that moment.
Precisely. His past was casting a long shadow over the company's present decisions. And this leads us to a really critical moment for Michael.
The point where he decides he can't rely on Kyler for certain crucial things.
That's the one. Michael identifies NPKB's Achilles heel, their whole brilliant HSP modem design. It absolutely depended on one specific proprietary component.
Which was?
The codec chip. It's the piece that translates the analog phone line signals into digital data for the computer and back again. Crucial.
Okay, and the problem was?
They had specified a codec made by a French company, SGS Thompson, and it was already becoming clear that this chip was hard to get. Partners were struggling to source it.
Uh-oh. So they have this amazing engine, the ASIC, but they can't get the transmission, the codec, to make it work.
Exactly. A single-source bottleneck that could bring the entire operation grinding to a halt. Potentially catastrophic.
And Michael saw this looming disaster.
He did. And having seen Kyler stumble on the LG delay, the mess in Taiwan, abruptly closing the funding round, Michael basically realized Kyler wasn't going to manage this critical supply chain risk strategically.
He couldn't trust the CEO to handle this technical but deeply strategic dependency.
The source suggests Michael just sort of gave up expecting Kyler to deal with it effectively. He knew he had to step in.
So the VP of Sales is now managing a critical component supply chain negotiation. That's quite the role shift.
It really is. But Michael understood how vital this was. If they couldn't get the codecs, the HSP modem was useless no matter how good the ASIC was.
How did he approach SGS Thompson? He's a sales guy, negotiating component supply with a major European manufacturer.
His preparation was apparently meticulous. He didn't just go in asking for chips. He gathered all the technical data, understood exactly why they needed this codec, and then he framed the negotiations strategically.
How so?
He positioned NPKB not as some small startup begging for parts, but as a future high-volume partner. He sold SGST on the potential of the HSP modem, the future orders, the scale they could achieve together.
Turning their potential strength into leverage, even when they were still small. Smart.
Brilliant, really. He made SGST see them as a vital long-term bet.
And it worked.
It did. SGST agreed to become a strategic partner. They essentially granted NPKB prioritized supply of the codec chip.
Wow. He single-handedly neutralized an existential threat.
Absolutely. That move, driven entirely by Michael stepping outside his defined role, averted a potential supply chain disaster just as they were trying to launch. It cleared a massive hurdle.
So, looking back at this whole phase, NTKB somehow weathered these massive storms.
Yeah.
The Intel reality check, the crippling LD delay, the internal chaos.
And they survived largely because Michael made these critical strategic interventions, especially securing that codec supply. It really underscores the turning point nature of that action within the crisis.
It definitely raises that interesting question, doesn't it? What do you do when the business leader has to jump in and fix a core technical supply problem because the technical leadership isn't handling it?
It's a fascinating case study in how organizational gaps can force people into unexpected but vital roles. That failure in management forced a necessary adaptation.
They survived the fire. They have a named product, the HSP modem. And now, crucially, they have a secure supply chain for it. That's huge progress, even if it was painful.
Massive progress. Now, finally, they might actually be able to turn all this crisis management into actual revenue, into cash.
Which sets us up perfectly for next time. Join us for Phase 5, the turning point. This is where MKKB truly starts to take off. The real, profitable ASIC chip finally gets produced.
Yep, the actual money-making chip, and they get the genuine ASIC evaluation boards out there.
Plus, remember that rigorous testing report from Japan we touched on earlier? That finally lands, and it opens the door to a game-changing account. IBM.
Orders start flowing, investment comes in. NPKB finally achieves a major industry milestone. It's the payoff after all the struggle.
Join us next time to see how NKKB turns crisis into triumph and how the chaos finally translates into real, tangible success.